Well, here we are, another stop on the journey to finding hope, inspiration, and positivity in this crazy world we all live in. You are listening to Changing the Perspective podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel and like this video below. If you are listening on a podcast service, please like our podcast on your preferred service. No matter how you choose to hear this interview, we are grateful you are following us on this journey. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Changing the Perspective. Today, I'm here with, is it Zachary Motes?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Zach and I actually met on a podcast group. It's been kind of a cool thing to connect with that community. And he does one called Living Self
Mhm.
podcast. And I actually listened to a few of his, had one that I just really connected with. And so I connected with Zach, and we're going to do a little guest swap on our podcast about kind of some struggles we've had in our lives. So, Zach, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you
happy to
for
be
joining
here.
us. So, kind of tell us a little bit about your story and kind of where you've been.
Okay. Um, I come from what most people would call a broken home. My parents divorced when I was really young. So I spent a lot of time through early childhood and into my teenage years moving around a lot,
Yeah.
from mom and dad, grandparents, other babysitters, things like that. So grew up with a lot of input from different places, a lot of different perspectives and lifestyles.
Yeah.
So I think at a young age, I already of just a whole lot of uncertainties about who I was, and it led to me as I grew up. Looking back now, I realized I had sort of this issue where I just wanted to belong. So like no matter where I was, no matter what types of people I was around, I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be loved.
Yeah.
Um, and then once my dad won custody of me right around 10 and 11, and so I moved in with him and my family. Now at that point were churchgoers. They were
Yeah.
very rooted in the Christian faith, and that kind of just became my life. I did ministry in youth group and in music and stuff. I mean, that's just what we did. That's what my family became known for. And
Yeah.
I met my wife in church. And after
Ah,
we got married, we started into ministry. And in 2011, my wife and I lost our first child.
yeah.
Um, and so those comfort zones and those, foundations of faith and everything, um, just kind of shattered for me. And I became just very bitter, was dealing with a lot of just brokenness. Everything just no longer made sense. Our son was born premature, and he lived for 9 days in intensive care before doctors came to us and basically told us that this was the end of the road, and if we ever wanted to hold him while he was alive, that we needed to unhook his machines and pretty much let him pass in our arms.
Wow.
And that's what we did. And in that moment, this 2-pound baby is taking its last breath in my arms. I remember just feeling dizziness, feeling numbness, but like immediately, it was like questions just started racing through my head. Like,
Mm.
what did I do wrong? Like, how did we get here? How do I make this make sense with everything that I've been raised to believe? Um, and those were questions that I could not answer in the perspective that I had been raised with. I never found an answer that gave me any sort of healing, any sort of comfort. And I kind of just tried to cling to everything because that's what was normal. And I knew that, I didn't want to let my loved ones down by, by losing my faith, losing my religion. Um, so I began to kind of just bury my pain with a lot of unhealthy habits, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a drummer in a cover band, and so being in the bars and drinking just kind of became my coping mechanism. And it got to a point where uh, it wasn't so much my questioning that was driving a wedge in my marriage. It was the bar life that was driving that wedge, and because I wasn't healing, I wasn't working on my healing. I just became very unpleasant to be around. Um, and it wasn't until years later, my wife and I, we went on. We now have a 6 and a 3-year-old sons. Um, and one night, my wife was 7 months pregnant with our 3-year-old. And I had already been kind of dealing with things and processing things and coming to the realization that like I was really messing things up, and that if I wanted to, one, save myself, but also save my marriage, and be a good example to my kids, that something needed to change. And so even though I knew that, like, I still just kind of went with the routines of band life and drinking. But yeah, one night she had to actually pick me up from a gig. Um, I was very, very drunk. I could barely get in my truck. Um, and so yeah, she, at like 2 in the morning, my 7 month pregnant wife, had to come and find me. Luckily, I wasn't too far from home. But I just remember her very passionately, but very lovingly telling me, things have got to change. And, you're raising sons. Is this how you want them to grow up? Um, and so I realized in that moment, like, I'm creating emotional scars in my boys that they're going to have to work through as adults. And I don't want to do that. Um, so it really was I guess, the kick that I needed to really put some effort into my healing.
Yeah.
I used the word stagnant a lot when I'm talking to people, and I really did for like 5 years, 6 years. That was life. It was just stagnant. Like, there was
Mhm.
no attempts at moving forward. There was no attempts at processing things. I had a lot of bitterness towards my former beliefs. I had a lot of bitterness towards the church. But so, somewhere along the lines, I realized that the first thing I had to do to create any sort of foundation for healing was give myself permission to question things, give myself
Mhm.
permission to doubt, to not settle with not knowing. Um, and so that kind of began the healing journey for me. And this part of my healing journey has been finding that balance between um, like individuality and my connection with other people. So learning to balance my well-being and my inner
Mhm.
peace, but also find the understanding and uh, the ability to focus on myself without you know causing intentional harm to my relationships. So working on a lot of patience, a lot of openness,
Yeah.
things like that. um,
Yeah.
But so now I've gone on to self-publish 2 books. The first one is called Living Self-Enlightened, and it kind of centers around my grieving journey, my healing journey, my spiritual changes that I've gone through over the years. And then a year later, actually last year, I wrote and published Living Self-Empowered, which is more centered around igniting your purpose and carving out your own path in life. And then the Living Self podcast kind of centers around the same work, using my story to help others, but also giving people a safe platform to share their stories with other people.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I kind of want to go back to a few things if you're good with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So you talk about kind of growing up in this broken past and Um, you hear people say,
Mhm.
don't let your past define your future. Although, growing up that way, that's hard because that is all you know. And so,
Mhm.
what advice do you give to people to kind of break that cycle or break that mental barrier of what my past was doesn't define what I am moving forward?
Okay. Um, for me, it's really a struggle because my my surroundings, most of my loved ones, we no longer share the same views. So it really came down to, understanding that, like, me not being okay with something, um, that matters, and I need to understand why I'm not okay with it.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and so my self-worth is knowing that if my inner peace or my purpose feels disrupted because of something, that's an area that I need to change.
Mhm.
But also being understanding and being, being aware of my temper and my being quick to get defensive with
Mhm.
loved ones when they don't see my changes as a good thing. I've spent a lot of time, just studying and reading about different perspectives and
Yeah.
uh, really developing I guess, a respectful appreciation for different views.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's been the biggest step forward for me in kind of breaking the cycle of my past beliefs. Is one, I had to tell myself that, clearly life is showing me that I'm not okay with this anymore, that this perspective is not really working for me anymore. Um, but I also had to be respectful because I know that the majority of people in my life, those beliefs, and that view, it's important to them, and they do still carry those things. Um, so it took a lot of learning that I can I can disagree with something without being disrespectful towards it, and
Yeah.
it's I don't have to set out to prove this thing wrong just because it no longer serves a purpose in my life.
Right.
Um, so that's really been the big thing. But outside of beliefs, if you're struggling with breaking any type of cycle, in my second book, I talk a lot about like breaking generational curses,
Yeah.
generational habits. Um, and for me, that really took a lot of understanding that. So, like thinking of a chain, like links in the chain,
Mhm.
and and knowing that, like, my link in this chain is connected to my son's, and if these are things that were a struggle for me to work through, like, I want to know how I can better my link in the chain so that my sons don't have to work through those same struggles.
Yeah.
Um, so it really involves a lot of, like, paying attention to things that I see that may be becoming unhealthy in my personal life, um, and working through those things. But uh, as far as like working through past habits and past beliefs, um, I think you have to look for, somebody the other day told me, like, yeah, look at the fruits, right? And so I started to look at my beliefs and say, okay, what fruits are coming from me trying to keep this mindset. um, and the
Yeah.
majority of the fruits that I could name were not good ones, right? A lot of um, there was a lot of bitterness, a lot of confusion, a lot of depression and anxiety. Um, I felt very disconnected from things, like I had no real
Yeah.
roots in anything anymore. So that would probably be the best advice, is to look at the fruits. If this is producing negative outcomes in your life, negative emotions, negative relationships, negative, thought processes, if it's producing self neglect, things like that, then it's probably definitely an area that needs to be broken free from.
Yeah. So I hear you say that it's a choice to break that link. It's a choice to improve it. It's a choice, you hear people kind of just say, "Well, that's how it's always been." Okay, but
Hmm.
you have the choice to make it better or to make it different. You don't have
Yeah.
to live in that what I would call the welfare mindset, the I'm
Mm.
just content where I'm at. You don't have to keep it that way. And so I hear you saying it you can make a choice to make that better or to change it. Um,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely realizing how much power you have to redirect your life.
Yeah.
For the majority of my life, it was just about kind of going with whatever the people around me were doing. And
Mhm.
um, because I so badly wanted to fit in and be accepted, like, um, it was never really an issue for me to just adapt to whatever my surroundings were. Into adulthood, understanding that that's probably not the healthiest way to live. Maybe it works for some people and it
Yeah.
never really causes too much discomfort. But when you get to a point where like you can't sleep at night because you're so like far from any type of peace with the things going on in your head, you've got to give yourself that permission to break free of those cycles.
Yeah. Yeah. Being self-aware,
Hmm.
um, that is something we all should do more of, and it's a hard thing to do, and I once you
Hmm.
start for me, once I got out of my traumatic situation and I went to the right counselor, I started really becoming self-aware because she taught me how to pay attention to my choice in every
Yeah.
situation. But it was a hard thing to kinda learn because 'cause you're just so used to just going, "Well, this is just me. Okay, no,
Hmm.
like, I need to be self-aware that what I'm doing may not be a positive to other people or to the situation or whatever." And
Yeah.
so, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with, things that, in society, they are like the important things, right? Like
Yeah,
your spiritual beliefs, your political views, like these are deal breakers for most relationships, most
right.
friendships. I my wife and I have had to really like focus on the love in our relationship because
Mhm.
technically, like, we don't see eye to eye when it comes to spiritual things anymore.
Yeah,
And that can be a big deal breaker for relationships.
yeah.
But again, a lot of patience, a lot of understanding,
Mhm.
a lot of love, and even a lot of encouragement by saying, just because I don't necessarily believe this, if this is where your healing is going to come from and this
Mhm.
is where you feel most at peace, then I encourage you to continue to press into that belief system, press into that faith, if
Yeah,
that is what you need, right?
yeah,
Just because I don't believe it doesn't mean I can't support it for you.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. So I assume your relationship is better than it was when she was a 7th month pregnant wife picking you up at the bar.
yeah, we've come a long way, definitely. There's still, those uneasy conversations
Mhm.
that nobody wants to have,
Right.
um, and especially when it comes to to a topic that you're going to disagree on. But so a lot of the work that I do, in my marriage and outside of my marriage, is encouraging people to embrace diversity, and to understand that we can learn from our differences. They don't have to be
Mhm.
cause for such divide. um, and that was something that I really, um, again, I think growing up in so many different diverse households already kind of instilled that knowledge
Yeah.
in me somewhere.
Yeah.
um, but a few years ago I enrolled in massage therapy school. I became a licensed massage therapist, and in that school was the first time that I was surrounded by people from just a vast amount of different beliefs, different lifestyles, different cultures.
Yeah.
Um, and to see like so many genuinely good-hearted and kind people from so many different backgrounds was that um was that like that seed I needed to have planted in me to understand that, like, okay, I can let this go and still be a good person, right? Like
Yeah.
there's plenty of good people out there who don't have my former beliefs.
Right.
So it kind of gave me that hope, like, okay, let's not be afraid to question things.
Hmm.
Let's see where this goes.
Yeah. I am an open-minded person. I have
Yeah.
friends from all different backgrounds, gay, straight, all of the stuff. And my husband came from super strict religion. And so when we met, my best friend is gay, and you could tell he was nervous to meet him. Like,
Mm.
this isn't my belief. And I'm like, just meet him. And we leave that meeting, and the first thing he says is, he is such a good person. And I'm like, I mean, did you think I was gonna hang out with someone that was just horrible? Like, I'm so confused. But in his
Right.
mind, because of the way he functionally grew up, like, that's just not what you did. And I'm like, "Oh, honey, like, there's a whole world of people out there that are amazing that you may not
Yeah.
agree with, but they are amazing."
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is I have a drive for knowledge, and so I want to know about people's backgrounds and cultures and, like, where they came from, regardless, of what it is. I want to
Yeah.
learn about it, and so me being open-minded, we definitely have explored very different things in our marriage because he came from I am Christian, and I will say, I go to church and I do all of that, but he was, like, involved. And
Yeah.
so we very much have had to explore the differences of that type of world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's neat you're experiencing some new cultures, going just to school. You got to see
Yeah.
cool things.
Right. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, and it helped me to let go. I was one of those people who like I've never been like aggressively um like vocal or physical towards people when I don't agree with them um on either side of my spiritual perspective now,
Right.
Um but going through these changes, I realized how much, like, in my mind I would have these um just disrespectful and almost
Mhm.
hostile um, thoughts towards my former beliefs and scoffing under my breath, like, this is so ridiculous, um, and things like that. And one night at school, I I was having a conversation with somebody, and and one of the things that I realized was, like, okay, so just for me, whether I'm a believer or not. So again, back to the fruits, like, if these changes aren't producing good fruits, then why am I changing?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and so that really became the focus in my spiritual studies and my questioning and seeking knowledge, was what what's going to really bring me that peace that I so desperately need,
Mm.
and what is going to help me to view our son's passing from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so the last few years, I've really I spent a lot of time, just studying uh, child loss, studying statistics on, premature births,
Yeah.
and even one of the biggest things that was helpful was like seeing how much like the medical field and science is working to lower those statistics
Mm.
to help with premature births and
Okay.
issues like that. So it just really opened my eyes to the fact that, like, I'm not the only one in the world that experiences this. Like, there are hundreds of thousands of people a year that
Yeah.
lose their babies. Um, so it really, even though I had not yet connected with any of those people, like, just knowing that those other stories were out there gave me this, like, sense of connection that I hadn't felt in a long time.
Yeah.
Um, so then, the idea of, okay, so me working through this part of my life, maybe it's not just about me. Like, maybe my healing uh, is for other people as well. and I stumbled in that conversation. My friend shared with me this quote that said, your healing journey will become someone else's survival guide. And
Mm,
man, I
yeah.
just remember like tears started flowing, and I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like this is how I reconnect back to society.
Yes.
This is it. Like I want to heal, not just for myself, but for anyone else that has struggled with loss in any way. Like I want to be somebody that they can feel connected to.
Yeah.
Um, and so in understanding that, I began to have. I spent a lot of time trying to change the way I looked at my son's death, and for so long, I looked at his death as a waste of a life. Like
Hmm.
it would just break me down. Like, man, he only got to live for 9 days, and like, what a waste.
Right.
But then I began to really look back on those 9 days and understand that, like, though his life was maybe short,
Hmm.
in those 9 days, he showed me that I could love deeper than I ever thought I could.
Yeah.
He gave me the heart of a father. um, he opened my eyes to questioning things that I don't agree with, and to not just settle for things to please people. So I can't really say his life is a waste, because I
Yeah.
mean, he in 9 days he completely changed my life.
Yeah.
And then also now, with the work that I do, that all stemmed from his life. Sharing my story is a part of his life continuing to ripple through everything that I do.
Yeah.
um, and that was probably the biggest breakthrough for me, was once I was able to see how much worth and how much um, good came from his life. Then the path of healing just got that much easier.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, the Living Self podcast.
Yeah.
So, my favorite, and I already messaged you and told you this, was the "How can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself?" And I
Hmm.
thought, now that is a unique spin on the whole concept of the 10 commandments, but
Yeah.
he was bringing it from an entire different place, and I was like, that is amazing. And so
Yeah.
my favorite episode, hands down, was probably that one. It was very candid and,
Hmm.
from it was a pastor that was part of that. From a pastor standpoint, sometimes I feel like the religious leaders get very much into just like cramming it down your throat in a way, like this is the only way you can do it, and that's like it. And he just took a totally different spin. So
Yeah.
I really liked that episode.
Yeah. That's been the neat part about all of this, is the more I find that the more at peace I become with, my thoughts and my beliefs and
Mhm.
in the way I view things now, um, the more at peace I come in, encouraging other people to find that same amount of peace and that same amount self-worth, in whatever they need to. Christians, I had a Buddhist monk on the show.
Yeah.
um, we've had, like you said, we've had people just from all different walks of life, different beliefs.
Yeah.
And even my co-host and I, we actually grew up in youth group together in church.
Mm.
um, and then both went on drastically different journeys for 10 years.
Yeah.
Reconnected. He and his family are still heavily involved in churches,
Yeah.
and he still practices his Christian faith.
Yeah.
So for us to come together every week and do this show together is just proof, like,
Yeah.
you don't have to agree with the people you're close to, and that doesn't affect the closeness. Like,
Yeah.
we are, if more people, we all are, and how vital our differences are to that interconnectedness, I think that the world would be in a much better place.
Yes, I agree. You guys definitely bring a different dynamic, and it's cool because there are times that on the few episodes I listened to kind of start out, there are times that you don't necessarily agree, and you call it out, but nicely, like,
Mhm.
why I see your point of view, like, let me
Yeah.
give the other spin basically. And I kind of enjoyed that because it wasn't just so one-sided that, you can't understand other pieces of it. And so
Yeah.
I think it's a great podcast. I would love to
Thank you.
put the links in this interview description so that people can find it. I think they would be fascinated in hearing what you have to say. I get to be a guest on it. I'm super excited to see what all comes
Yeah.
out of that one. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. I'm looking
Any
forward to that one.
anything you want to close out with? Advice or kind of anything you got going you want to talk about?
Sure. So three three things that I always like to tell people real quick is the first one when it comes to relationships and dealing with differences. Um, this is the number one advice I would give to working on maintaining a relationship and balancing those differences. Um, and that is, uh, so many times as we grow up, we're taught that a relationship is 50-50, right?
Mhm.
Like you have to be 50%, I have to be 50%, and that makes 100. Um, well, um, I'm gonna watch my language. I'll say BS. That's BS, right?
Yeah.
um, so I believe that good, healthy relationships are when both people bring 100% to the relationship. So in that, in order to be 100% genuinely, true to yourself, you have to give yourself the permission to be different from the other part of that relationship, whether it be a friend, whether it be a mom or a dad or a husband or a wife. Like start uh, accepting the fact that you guys don't always have to see eye to eye,
Yeah.
um, but that those differences don't have to be cause for argument. They don't have to be cause for fighting and things like that. That if love is first and foremost, and in that love there is a kindness and a respect, then you should be encouraging each other to stay committed to being 100% true to who you are.
Yeah. I
um,
like it.
and then the second one is we just launched a mini series called Bringers of Peace, through the Living Self podcast, and that concept, the Bringers of Peace, is really are trying to inspire peace in their communities. Um, so that's a little motto. We have a T-shirt that's our Bringers of Peace T-shirt. We like to encourage people that in all situations, in all areas of life, um, the society is calling out for people who can be those bringers of peace,
Yeah.
and teach people that we can embrace the diversity, and that we can have these conversations in real, like, loving atmospheres. um,
Yeah.
and then the last thing that I would say is, pay attention to, if you've gone through a loss of some kind, um, and you're wondering, how do I go about getting through this?
Mhm.
One, I'll tell you, it's not something that you're ever going to work past. It's not something you just get over and move on from. It's something that you learn to live with. It's And those waves of grief, at times may be big and just
Mhm.
feel all consuming. But sometimes they're smaller. Maybe sometimes, you're kind of just peacefully floating in the shallows. But
Yeah.
so to be understanding of that, the grief may come in waves, but pay attention to the harmony of your healing, your growth, and your purpose. So, I find, people want to stay stuck in the same thing and just expect to heal and grow.
Yeah.
Um, but so we use the symbolism of a tree with our podcast, and I tell people, you can be this beautiful tree planted in this clay pot and live your entire existence in that safety of that pot.
Mhm.
Um, but when you want to grow and expand and dig deeper and reach higher, um, you take that tree out of that pot and plant it in the ground,
Yeah.
and it's completely free to grow and to chase dreams and to go through seasons and to learn new things. So that's really the balance for me is, you can't heal if you're not willing to grow. You can't grow if you're not willing to change, and you can't really walk in your purpose if you're not being true to your growth. And
I like it. I like it. All right. We're going to close out if that's good for you.
Absolutely.
All right. I want to thank everyone who watched with us today. We're super excited to have you as part of this. If you watched this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like this video. If you watched it or you listened to it, I guess, on your podcast service, please make sure to subscribe to that podcast service and make sure to 5-star rate us and review us there. We'd be so excited to have your likes on those services as much as possible. I hope everyone had an amazing week. Have a good weekend, and we will catch you all next time. Bye.